Good afternoon and welcome to BizTech's Personal Finance Show. Now, today our focus is on helping you on your journey towards financial freedom. Now, here to give us his insights on how you're going to achieve this is Han Liew, co-founder of Ringgit Plus. Han, welcome to the show.
Hi, Brian. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me.
Now, Han, let's start by taking a look at something that's really difficult. Now, Malaysians have been struggling with their finances as a result of the aftermath associated with the pandemic. Now, they're either people who have lost their jobs, have had pay cuts, decline in their businesses, and so forth. Now, Ringgit Plus does a regular Malaysian financial literacy survey. Now, what have your survey results shown you?
Oh, I mean, financial literacy, is huge, right? As we all know. And yes, at Ringgit Plus, we do those surveys. And our big survey is called the Ringgit Plus Malaysian Financial Literacy Survey. And this year, just so happened, we did it, a few months after, the MCOs in Malaysia, or the lockdown, as some people will call it, due to the pandemic. So we're able to get a nice snapshot of time of the situation of Malaysians as they were experiencing the pandemic and how it impacted their personal finances. Right? And what we found, some of the usual expected scary bits, but some also a little bit more surprising, right? So here's an example.
So what are the usual scary bits?
Okay, so the usual scary bits are that a majority of Malaysians say they are in control of their money. So like something like high 60, 70% Malaysians say, I feel in control. Yet when we ask specific questions around things that might give you a sense of whether they're in control or not, the answers might seem contradictory. So here's an example. If 70% of people say, I feel I'm in control of my money, yet they go, yet more than half of Malaysians say, you know what, actually my savings, I don't have more than 3 months salary of my savings. I have less. Right? So for me, that doesn't quite jive, right? And then another data point is like 40% of people don't save anything at all, aren't able to save anything at all. So for people who feel in control yet not being able to save any money at all, that feels somewhat surprising to me, or somewhat contradictory, right? So that's kind of the usual stuff where people
feel like Han, you know what? You said that it's kind of the usual stuff, but I think one of the things that the surveys and the data has shown us is this: it is not just low-income people who are facing this dilemma. It's also very high-income people who also fall into that 40% who cannot save any money at all. Essentially, they spend more than they earn.
Yeah, I mean, you're right, Brian. The usual trope is, look, it's obviously if I don't have enough money, I can't save. I don't earn enough, so therefore I'm low income, I can't save, right? But what we found is throughout the income brackets, regardless of whether you are in the kind of 2,000 to 4,000 ringgit a month income bracket, or kind of 10 to 20,000 ringgit income a month bracket, we found similar numbers, obviously not the same, but similar trends, right? So similar trends in terms of not being able to save, not being able to survive more than 3 months without their salary, not having enough for retirement, right? 2/3 of Malaysians say, look, I don't think I have enough for retirement, right? And it's largely irrespective of where they were in the income bracket. So, I mean, what you made the exact point, and I fully agree with that based on the survey results that we saw.
Now, what else did you glean from the latest financial survey, literacy survey?
I mean, a couple of cool stuff, COVID related or MCO related, is that one of the things that I guess would be interesting for you and your readers would be digital adoption for e-payments, right, and e-wallet adoption, right? This year, more than 90% of respondents actually said, I have an e-wallet account, I use it.
Oh, that's very high. That's very good adoption.
Yeah. It's clear trend from kind of the whole, okay, you're locked down. Okay, try not to handle cash, try not to do contact payments, let's do contactless. And e-wallets became a big part of that on one side. And then obviously on the other hand, government incentives around e-Tunai, e-Perjana, drove up adoption tremendously. So there was kind of like a dual effect of, I don't want to handle cash because I'm scared of contact, as well as, hey, look, there's kind of 30, 50 ringgit in your e-wallet, just use it, right? And drive spending that way. So clearly, that combination of government incentives as well as physical cash handling in the time of COVID-19 was a driver of that kind of adoption. 90%, that is tremendous, right? In terms of adoption.
Now, Malaysia, where have Malaysians primarily found themselves of debt? Is it in housing loans, credit cards, or cars?
Yeah, I think this one's a little bit interesting in terms of the type of respondents that we got, or responses that we got in terms of why are you in debt, or how many loans do you have and what issues you have, right? I think if you don't even need the Ringgit Plus survey for kind of mix of loans. I think Bank Negara issues these stats out anyway. But across Malaysia, it's kind of 50% home loans, 20% car loans, and then 20% personal loans. And actually, credit cards don't account for as much as people think. It's kind of like 10 to 15% of kind of that loan portfolio, or the contribution to why I'm so indebted.
I think but there's two aspects of that, isn't it? One is, yes, this is part of the loan portfolio, but the other thing is the fact, Han, that you've got the problem loans are in the credit cards. Is that correct?
Actually, if you look at AKPK's own stats, what they say is the number one cause of bankruptcy, right, is a car loan, actually, right? Because and I don't want to presume too much around why that is the case, but I can only imagine that it's because most people get a car for something and then therefore they have a loan, and then credit cards is more of a if I feel like spending, I'll get one. So one is more of a stage of life loan, and the other is more of a lifestyle loan. And not everyone goes through the same lifestyle, but everyone seems to go through the same stage of life, which is, I graduate, I get a job, I get a car. So AKPK's own stats say that bankruptcies, the largest kind of contributor to that is high purchase cars, for cars. So for me, that's kind of that's kind of it all comes together in a kind of a mishmash of things. But I think in the COVID world, what was also interesting is how useful that loan moratorium was, which is last year as we did the survey, everyone said, look, like, I've actually taken up the moratorium. I needed it. I took it up, right? And I think without that moratorium, it would have been quite devastating for household incomes or households and capability of households to survive through that period. So I think that was, I don't say a good move, but a needed move to avoid, honestly, catastrophe, right? So that came out in the survey in terms of, almost 20% of Malaysians said, hey, look, actually, I would be in trouble without it, right? And 20% is huge, as you might know, speaking to the bankers of the world. Having 20% impacted in the portfolio of loans might be a catastrophic thing, right?
Yeah, and that's a very good point, Han, because essentially it helped two sides of the equation. On one hand, it helped the individual households and also individual SMEs to survive. Literally, it took the stress out of that element. Now, the second part of it, the equation, is also it took out stress out of the banking system, because essentially we would have had a catastrophe, and financially as a nation, we would have been in trouble. But again, this is a playbook that has been repeated across the world. In fact, in Australia and stuff, they've extended the moratoriums even further. The Biden administration is now thinking of doing moratoriums for up to 18 months.
Yeah, I think, I mean, for me, my view on that is perhaps to consider a shorter time period in terms of, because I don't want to, this is not obviously a talk about health and health crisis, but things are changing so quickly with the virus and the pandemic situation that for me, it's very challenging to create long-term policies specifically for that, right? The long-term should be focused on kind of economic recovery, but if you're looking at stimulus or reliefs, you got to look short-term, like no longer than 3 months, because things change so drastically in 3 months. We saw that kind of 3 months ago, we were not in this situation in Malaysia, we're in this situation now, etc., etc. So for me, that's kind of my opinion on the matter around release. But what is true is that it has been extremely educative period also for Malaysians of what a restructuring is, what a moratorium means. I'm 100% sure that more people today know what moratorium means than there were this time last year. So that kind of thing actually also helps literacy, right? Where crisis creates opportunity to also educate on financial concepts like moratorium, debt restructuring, that kind of stuff.
Okay, Han, let's now go to the nuts and bolts. you've just come out of, you've got some financial situations, you need to manage your credit card debts, you need to all your various loans. Let's start with how to manage our money better in 2021. And we start with managing your credit card debts. What do you think you would recommend, or what is your advice to people in terms of managing their credit card debts?
Yeah. Very, very simple, right? Very, very simple, which is the first step is acknowledging that you have a problem, right? Some people just have the debt, and then the colloquial term is roll, right? They roll the debt. What that means is your credit card balances grow bigger and bigger, and it doesn't hurt you today because you've got that credit facility, right? Which you're using to either fund your lifestyle or fund actually essential stuff, right? And for me, the key is to take a kind of dipstick test of, do I have a debt issue with my cards, right? And the one test is, are your balances growing every month, right? You can manage it because a credit card allows you to only pay 5%. But at Ringgit Plus, we always say, look, like the first step in solving a problem is just looking for it and making sure that it's there or not, right? And identifying it. Once you've identified it, what I mean by that is, look, like it's growing. That means you're starting to have a balance which is accruing very high interest. When I say high interest, I mean, I don't mean interest itself is bad. I mean, high interest is bad. High interest, 12 to 15% per annum, right?
Yeah.
If you're going to take on debt because you need it for your essentials or whatever, might as well make sure it's the cheapest form of debt you can take, right? So I would look to do various things really quickly. Do a balance transfer onto a 0% credit card for a short term while things are rocky right now, rather than paying kind of 12 to 18%, you're paying 0 to 3% depending on the actual product out there. And again, it's not solving the problem in that I'm asking you to take on more debt, but it's better to have a 0% debt than taking on more 12% debt. So that's an immediate kind of, look, like it's very easy for kind of the big kind of financial experts to go, well, you shouldn't take debt, but sometimes it's just unavoidable because of circumstances. If you have to go into that situation, go with the cheapest form of debt. Balance transfers, easy payments, don't build long-term expensive debt, 12 to 18% on a credit card. There are other ways to do it.
Now, how about your other loans? Now, one of the things you mentioned is, I think the biggest issue with is car loans in terms of bankruptcy. So how would you take care of your car loans? That's a trickier situation, right?
Very, very tricky, I'm afraid. Right? I think the thing about car loans is that most people see it as a need, and cars may be a need for most people, right? But I think the key to figure out is, look, like if I took out the car for a situation in which I was driving to work because I needed it, by definition, it's an asset, right? Because without it, I can't generate income from my work, right? But if you're in that situation where, hey, look, I've got a car loan, I'm paying monthly, but I'm barely using my car because I'm at home. And if you're fortunate to be in that situation where, look, like you've got a car which is no longer an asset now, it's actually now just it's a nice and luxury to have rather than I needed it to generate income. That's the first kind of consideration to think through yourself. And I'm not saying, hey, look, downsize yourself, sell your car, that kind of stuff, if you as a blanket statement, because I think that's very irresponsible, right? But like your general, as in your general viewpoint should be, hey, why did I buy the car in the first place? Has that changed? If that has not changed, then for me, I consider it an asset, which is I need the car to drive to work. I work in a factory, I work on a farm, I need to be there, etc. Or am I no longer using it as an asset to generate income? If I'm not, then I will have to see it as an unnecessary expense, right? Rather than an asset. So that's how I would have that in view.
Now, Han, there's also a bigger problem with car loans, is the fact that I've bought a new car, but the loan, and I've taken a 9-year loan, which is a common thing in Malaysia, unfortunately. But then essentially after using it for 2 years, I realized, hey, I can't really afford to make the payments anymore. I still have another car. I need to get rid of my car. But when you take it to the used car dealer and so forth, you realize that the difference between the cost of full settlement of your loan and the value of the car may be significantly different. For some people, it means topping up $20,000, $30,000, $40,000, $50,000. How do we solve that problem?
I mean, the biggest way to solve that, and I guess, I mean, what you said is a very common issue, right? With many Malaysians who have elongated loans. And for me, it's not an easy thing to solve, right? There are many facets. And the first thing I guess I'd like to point out is that actually car loans are not expensive. Sorry, I mean that in the kind of the most kind of financial position kind of way, which is what I mean by that is that they're typically in the low 1, 2, 3% interest per annum on a flat basis, which means they are kind of 2, 4, or 5% on an APR basis, right? So essentially, you're talking low single digits in terms of interest rates. Now, however, if you cannot afford repayments and are building up debt elsewhere, for example, your credit card, to do so, then it does not make sense, right? You're building a 12 to 15% debt, right? And paying off a 3 to 5% loan, right? So for me, if you're in that situation, the key is to take the hit and don't build expensive debt to cover off the cheap debt, because you might as well get a lower loan, pay it off, and you're only paying kind of 3-4% on the difference, rather than building up 12 to 18% on your credit card debt. So again, like, you got to be pragmatic about it and not worry about what kind of thing you're doing. You just got to look at the number and go, am I building expensive debt to cover off a cheap debt? If I am, then I'm not doing the right thing. I've got to do the other way around, which is I've got to make sure that I can use cheap debt, pay off expensive debt, and then pay off over time. So that's kind of how I look at it. If you can't afford the installments at all, then you probably need to take the hit, right? Because you're going to go further and further into debt, which will compound over time versus taking the hit today.
So taking the hit then may be financing the difference in that number. Yep. So in other words, taking a loan to finance that difference, and then that's all you're paying. Yep. So basically then you take a lower quantum, it's lower installments, and then that reduces your debt burden overall.
Exactly. And if you are doing it anyway, so I'm not saying take a new loan if you don't have to. If you're doing it anyway because you're struggling, right? What I mean by doing it anyway is your credit card balances are going up, for example, because you're having to fund this car loan, which you cannot. That difference is accruing interest at 12 to 18%. You might as well, right, get a small loan to cover the difference at 3, 4, 5%, whatever that number is. A number that's smaller than what you're doing today. So that's kind of slightly complicated, right, but as simple as go low, go for the low option rather than the high interest option.
Okay, that's a good takeaway. Now, look, we've just talked about debt management, but let's look at the positive side. Many of us want to know about how to grow our money, and they're looking to invest in shares. They're looking to, the current thing with GameStop, I think people have really got excited about investing as retail investors. They're also looking at robo-advisors, the likes of Stashaway and stuff like that. Han, could you share some general tips on what to look for or how to start growing your money?
Sure, no problem. I think there's been a lot of excitement, not just in the recent months with GameStop, Nokia, BlackBerry, etc., and the kind of Wall Street bets kind of wave. I think even before that, there's been a lot of interest in the retail stock market. In Malaysia, you're talking, if you remember, months before that, it was Bitcoin. And months before the Bitcoin thing, it was, glove stocks. And then months before the glove stock thing, yes, it was, exactly. So there are waves which drive investment. But I think for all retail investors who might be thinking about going into it the first time, I'll share with you a simple statistic. 95% of retail and even institutional investors don't beat the market in the long term. It's a study that's been proven, right? Now,
are you willing to, right?
Yeah. Are you willing to take the risk that you will be in that 5%? And mind you, this includes even experienced institutional investors, right? Guys with like multiple degrees doing analysis of stocks or whatever, right? Only 5% of these people beat the market. Why not put yourself in the number 6 position out of 100 and invest with the market rather than trying to time the market? So time in the market makes you the
with
6th
ETF or something like that.
Yeah, ETFs, index funds. In this case, you mentioned robo-advisory. I can go into that in a bit more detail. So in general, time in the market is better than timing the market. So is it up or down? Doesn't matter. I'm going in bit by bit every month. I'm dollar cost averaging. I'm just putting money in every month. I don't care whether it goes up or down. And I'm going to be the 5th best investor, in a kind of room of 100 investors, right? So I want to be in that position because am I going to take the risk that I'm going to be 1, 2, 3, 4? No, right? I want to be the 5th guy in the room, right? Out of 100 investors. So I'm better than 95 investors in an average room, right? So for all retail investors out there, you can already be in the top 5 investors in the world. So why not be in that position by diversifying? Don't time the market. There's no need to pick stocks. You're going to be the top 5% of investors just by being in the market. So do that. And when it comes to robo-advisory, sorry, I mean, you mentioned robo-advisory. I'll go into it really quickly, which is robo-advisory allows you to have a low-cost entry into that market. So robo-advisors do not pick stocks. They just put you in the market and then they rebalance your risk according to your risk level. So if one stock goes above the other or one asset goes above the other, they'll just rebalance to your risk profile.
And you know, Han, that's a whole separate show itself, and we can talk about robo-advisory. But now, and I think we will do something like that in a future episode of our personal finance show. But right now, how do we learn to manage our finances better? Wouldn't a first step be really to check your financial health?
Yeah, I think, Brian, what you said is exactly true, right? Which is you can't manage things better unless you know where you are, right? And there are a few ways to know where you are. The first is, okay, how am I doing from a day-to-day, am I surviving basis? Am I building debts? Are my debts healthy? The first thing to do is to do a quick credit check, right? Our credit score, credit health check. We have that service at Ringgit Plus called My Ringgit Health. It's free. Come in, check your health. Make sure there are no kind of structural issues with your debt, because that's the first problem to solve. There's no point in building lots of wealth if you're also building lots of problematic debt, which you will erode your wealth. Right? So that's kind of first step. Second step, honestly, is to engage an expert, right, and do it as cheaply as possible, right? Meaning, whether it's a financial advisor or financial planner, the kind of a few hundred to a few thousand ringgit you spend today will be worth hundreds of thousands over the course of your investing life. So that kind of investment is worth making. If you think you're making an investment, invest in educating yourself, either by doing it yourself and educating yourself, or getting experts. So that's kind of the two-step process I would look for most Malaysians to take.
Now, final question, Han, any words of wisdom that you want to leave our listeners and people who are watching us?
No, I mean, the last word would be, don't panic, find out where you are, act early, and invest in the long term. So for me, that's kind of the 3 or 4 things to do.
Han, thank you very much for coming on the show, and thank you for your insights.
No, thanks, Brian.
Now, we've been speaking to Han Liew, co-founder of Ringgit Plus, on BizTech's Personal Finance Show. I'm Brian Fernandez. Check out www.biztech.asia for business and technology conversations.